Hello denizens of the internet, this is Kira Una coming to you today with another video. Today we're going to be continuing in our How to Sew series. This particular series of various videos is there to help anyone who is just wanting to learn how to sew, who may be doing quilting but not so much in the garment side of things, to help you get your foot in the door so that you can follow along with these various projects. I will try to keep them as small as possible so that you can make just about anything that you want to. With that said, I am very well aware that there are people that have a strong opinion about Singer brand sewing machines. I do too, considering I've asked their customer service something and they ghosted me. However, with that said, I'm bound and determined to try and fix my own machines or repair them and keep them as best working as I possibly can. I found most of the information that I needed on the internet, and any information that I do find, I will try to provide that information to you as best as I can. Whether it's on the manual library, the Internet Archive, or elsewhere that is available for free for the general public to use. In my opinion, it doesn't matter what brand you have. Yes, I did not have that much money. I know that there are better brands out there, but it was what was accessible to me at the time. I have a serger, I have the heavy duty Singer machine, and I have what I call a beater machine, which is a Singer Esteem 2. That one was given to me for free. I can't complain with free, so I mean, you know, who can really? But in my opinion, if it works, if it sews, even if it's one of those toy machines, if it helps you get your foot in the door, if it helps you get started, if you're looking for a really cheap alternative that you don't care if it breaks, then that is the perfect sewing machine for you to use. I am also here to help you to, over the time I will go through, take apart my machines and show you how you can oil it, maintain it, and all of that good stuff. But before I get too rambly, let's get on with the tutorial. Alright, so if I sound a little bit stuffy, that's because I am recovering from a bout of COVID. I'm trying to get this out there because it is the new year, it's 2025, and people have projects. People get confused in terms of what they need to do for sewing. Some of you may have gotten a recent machine. It may not necessarily be the same make and model as the one I'm currently using. You want to learn how to use it. You want to get started on making something, whether it is a quilt, or if it's clothing, or if it's a bag, or something utilitarian, or even just to mend your own clothes. Keep in mind, what I'm going to be going over will be, I would say, generally universal between most makes and models of what is known as a mechanical machine. Most of the information that I'm also going to provide you is also going to provide some basics for a digital machine as well. Also with an industrial machine. Here in North America, and especially even in Canada, this may throw you off a little bit. With the exception of, I would say, Quebec. Most people, when they're sewing, will work in imperial. I know it sounds strange, but almost all of the patterns that are made usually come up from the States, so a lot of the patterns will come in imperial. So we're talking inches and quarters and halves and eighths of inches. So since we're working in imperial, we're going to be working in eighths of an inch. So generally speaking, you want to, and I'm using my little crochet hook here to demonstrate where it is. It is a little bit blurry because of the angle of my phone, and I apologize about that. Not all machines will have this. This is what is commonly used as the throat plate. Ignore the tails of the thread for a second. So on the throat plate where your needle goes in, catches the bobbin thread, which I'm not sure if you can see that on frame here, but the bobbin is right here. It will loop around, catch it, and pull that thread up to make your stitch. Now, with this particular set of grid marks, these top ones here are in eighths of an inch. And then the bottom ones here are in millimeters. Let me grab it should be from the center of the needle. So yeah, the 10 mark is 10 millimeters, this mark is 20 millimeters, and so on. I don't know what the equivalent is off the top of my head, and my brain isn't really mathing very well at the moment. So anybody who does metric for sewing, I will try to put the equivalent somewhere on screen from inches to millimeters or centimeters for you. Keep in mind that this video again is catered to the North American market, not necessarily to the European or other countries. When we're talking about seam allowance, that is generally the distance between the edge of the fabric to where your stitch forms, which is at the needle here. If you'll take a look, you'll see that the needle is fairly centered. And if I take the presser foot off, there's a little catch lever switch back here. You'll see a nice big wide open gap and these little teeth. Just to give you a bit of a recap, essentially what I took off of the machine is called the presser foot. It's what helps hold your fabric down. And we have these teeth, which is called the feed dogs. They are what will feed your fabric. This is from your sewing point of view, as well as mine. So it will feed from here and feed it going in that direction. Now I'm going to put the presser foot back. There we go. For your seam allowance, most mass manufactured patterns that you will get from the bigger companies like Butterick, McCall's, Simplicity, Vogue, and I think New Look is still existing. I don't remember if they're still in manufacturing or not. Those particular companies will set their seam allowances at 5/8 of an inch. If you take a look, your 5/8 inch seam allowance is right here. So that means whenever you're sewing, all of the seam allowance is generally in those patterns included, unless it states otherwise elsewhere on the pattern, that your seam allowance will be 5/8 of an inch. When it comes to garment construction in the industry, so we're talking fast fashion companies, most of the time the seam allowance is 1/2 an inch. So that is this mark right here. There are other times where it will be 1/4 of an inch. And I'm just going to put the presser foot down so you can see a little bit easier. The 1/4 of an inch line is almost exactly from the edge of the presser foot to the center of the needle. If you're doing things that require a lot less seam allowance, that is a guideline that you can use. And if you really need to later on, if you find that the seam is too bulky or if it's too long, you can always trim that down later. That's not a problem. One of the things that you should do once you've done spooling up your bobbin with the thread, making sure everything is threaded and you have your tails, both bottom and top, ready to go for sewing, you have an appropriate needle for the project that you're working on. I'm gonna double check that because I think I was working with the stretchy material last time. Yes, I was. See, I have my needles color-coded to tell me what I was working on, because sometimes you need to change out your needles for the project that you're doing, and not all needles work with all fabric types. So this was a stretch needle. We're not going to be working with stretch today. We're going to be working with woven. So this particular needle is a little bit bigger than I'd like to, but it will do for this demonstration purpose. This is probably a size 90-14 needle, I believe, if I remember correctly, but we're going to use it for this particular demonstration. So let me just install that real quick. You want to make sure your needle is nice and secure. And if I bump the camera, here, I'll show you this setup just so that you can see. This is the struggles of being a sewing YouTuber. I have it on 2 Holo Taco shipping boxes and a wad of paper to get the right angle for you. And I want to show you the angle that you would see when you are working on your own projects, because there is nothing more frustrating of somebody showing a camera angle from here and you don't see where your seams are lining up over here. So this is why I'm going through these lengths to try and show you how this is done. So let me thread this real quick, and I will explain how to balance your tension and do a test strip before you start on your main project. Now that I have my needle threaded, we're going to do what's known as a sample piece. Generally speaking, you want to use a fabric that is the same as the project that you're working on. What I'm going to be doing a little bit later on is I'm planning on sewing a skirt that has an invisible zipper, but I need to be able to show you how the stitching works. So I'm using a slightly contrasting fabric. Plain woven cotton, you could probably use this for quilting. It's about the same sort of thickness as quilting cotton. And I'm going to show you how to make a bare bones basic seam. One thing to keep in mind is that sewing, everything that encompasses sewing, is really only 1% of the work. You have your other percentages that break down, such as cutting, pressing, fixing a seam. Everything that I'm going to show you will not require you to have a serger. You will see serged edges or ends on certain projects that I'm working on because that's how I prefer to sew. I've been wanting to get a serger for a while to make my seams look a little bit cleaner, a little more professional, and sort of expected when doing sample pieces or other work in the industry. For home sewing, you do not need a serger. You can get one if you want one, and that is an entirely different beast altogether to use, but you do not have to have a serger to do sewing. So to actually sew a very, very, very basic straight stitch seam, which is the most common seam that you will use, this is something that all machines have. This is something that industrial machines, for the most part, only do one thing, and they do it really well, which is straight sewing a seam. Most home machines will have a zigzag or a straight stitch and a bunch of other stretch stitches and maybe a buttonhole stitch. To sew 90% of what you have at home for what you want, all you need is a straight stitch. I'm not going to mark anything on my fabric because the gauges here on the side, these lines, will tell me what I'm sewing at. So we have the 1/4 inch at the side of the presser foot here, like right up against the edge. I'm going to position the fabric just so you can see. That would be your 1/4 inch. And then if you scooch it just slightly at the 3/8, that is 3/8 of an inch. And again, that would be from the edge of the fabric to the middle of the needle. And then we have 1/2 inch, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, and 1 inch. Some people will, if you need a really, really, really thick seam allowance, some people will use tape as a guideline somewhere on the plate here for their 2 inch, their 3 inch, their 5 inch, whatever. There's only so much room this machine has. This is not a long arm machine, so you may need to do some funny scrunching with your fabric to get it to feed into this space, especially if it's really chunky or if you're doing quilting. But that is not what we're doing today. I'm just sort of verbalizing some information that you may need for later, or it may influence what type or style or necessity of type of machine that you may want to get if this is something that you're interested in getting for yourself if you don't have a machine yet, but you're intrigued on how to start the process. Sorry for the word salad, but it is important information. Like, there's so much that a beginner might want to know before they get diving into actually the act of sewing. For beginners, I would recommend pinning your projects, as much pins as you need to, but I strongly advise do not go over your pins with your needle, because if you happen to hit your needle as you're sewing, that can damage your machine, that can bend the needle arm. The needle arm is what holds the needle in its position when it's sewing and what moves up and down. You could accidentally break off a piece and have it hit your eye. If you really have to go over your seams when you are sewing with needles in place, I strongly recommend that you invest in a pair of safety goggles. I have a pair at my machine for the really thick seams that if I fear the needle is going to break, I put them on. Make sure that machine is on, make sure everything is threaded correctly for the material and the project that you're working on. I am working with a not stretchy material for this demonstration, and we're going to get started. Now, to balance this out, I'm going to start at 5/8 of an inch, and I'm going to just make a straight line between these two pieces of fabric, because I want to know if my tension is balanced. So this is the seam allowance mark. You want to line up your two pieces of fabric as best as you can so they run parallel to each other. So sort of like a fabric sandwich. And we're going to put that there. Now to start the seam off, you always lower the presser foot because this will help to prevent your fabric from bunching. It will make sure that the fabric feeds through those little teeth that I showed you earlier, the feed dogs, and it will also help to keep the tension of the stitches even, because when you lower the presser foot, the tension discs on the inside of where you threaded it, the tension discs are somewhere located in this groove here. So they are open when the presser foot is up, and then they close and tension the thread when the presser foot is down. So that is generally how 90% of the sewing machines will work. I have my foot on the foot pedal. I'm going to sew using the foot pedal. The foot pedal works the same way as gas on a car. The more full down that you push the foot pedal, the faster your machine will go. I'm going to go as slow as possible, just so that you can see how the speeds work, and just to give you an idea of what going slow looks like. Sorry, that started off a little faster than I expected. And you'll see that I'm keeping the fabric on that 5/8 inch marker. And then when you come to the end of the fabric itself, or when you're done your seam, you will want to stop. You can leave the needle in the fabric at the moment, because we're going to go backwards to finish that knot. So I'm going to hit the reverse button. I'm going to step back a couple stitches. It was like 3 or 4. I released the reverse button, and then we're going to go forward again to finish that seam. Now, you don't want to yank on the fabric when the needle is in the fabric itself, because you'll break your needle. You could break your needle arm. So take your time, use the hand wheel to pull the needle out of the fabric, again by pulling towards you on the hand wheel. And then before you do anything, lift the presser foot, which will release the tension discs so that you can easily pull the fabric out and then clip the threads. And that is where you have a completed seam. And then when you're going to, like, say for example, if this is actually a garment, you will want to take this over to your ironing board. If you have one, it is recommended that you get one with an iron. Open the seam and then press this flat with your iron. When it comes to seam finishing, that is a different ball of wax. There's a bunch of different methods. For this kind of fabric, you really don't need to. Like, you could very well wear this with raw edges. That's not an issue. There are methods that you can finish it off though if you feel the need. But this is just a test strip. So when you're done your test strip, you'll want to examine the stitches to see if it's balanced. So this looks pretty balanced to me. Like, there's a couple of spots where it may not look as balanced as I would like it to because I went really fast and really slow, but overall, not bad. Now, what happens if you have a seam that's unbalanced? Something that's either too tight or too loose. Now, I'm going to show you what it looks like unbalanced. I'm going to show you what happens if you don't put your presser foot down when you're trying to sew something. I'm going to use the same fabric just as a comparison. This is a little bit of troubleshooting. So I'm going to try and sew and not put the presser foot down. Believe me, I don't like doing this, but this is to show you what it looks like. So you're going to have no means of controlling the fabric because the presser foot won't be able to give tension on the feed dogs to put it through the machine. So that means also that the tension discs are also going to be not tensioned properly. Now, for my own safety, I'm going to put my safety goggles on just in case I break the needle, because that is also a possibility. And let's see what happens if you don't put the presser foot down. Yeah. Got a little bit of rat nesting on the bottom, or birds nesting. Pick an animal. So now you can see we've got some loops on the bottom. This is the bottom of the fabric, or the bottom of the, this is the side that the bobbin would have been on. So you've got some gnarly looping, inconsistent stitches, and then you've got no way of controlling it to make it go straight. The consistency of the length of the stitches is way off. Like, some are shorter, some are longer. And that is one of the most common problems that somebody will run into when they're first learning how to sew. So always remember to put the presser foot down before you start sewing. You will have a much easier time, and it will go a lot straighter if you do. So I'm going to use the side of the plate here as sort of a guideline to show you the difference. Much straighter, much more consistent. No puckering, no bubbling, and no funny looping. I would like to thank our latest Ko-Fi donor here to this channel. Their username, and I apologize if I mispronounce it, is Ninive, and they had said that the tutorial on how to waterproof a bag with using beeswax was incredibly helpful to them. So thank you so much for your donation. If you would like to donate to this channel to help me out with either sewing supplies in between trying to go to school, to help keep me caffeinated, to help fund other projects similar to the ones that I have been posting up, please donate to my Ko-Fi page, and you can use the QR code on screen or the link in the description box down below to donate. Every little bit helps. Also, please note that if you cannot donate monetarily, you can help out this channel by liking this video or any of my videos, subscribing, and commenting on my videos about anything. I may reach back out to you to help you on a project. It also helps to boost the algorithm so that the video is seen by more people so that I can help them too. Alright, so that is the end of this particular tutorial, and I will see you all later. Bye!